Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending March 31st. We've got a big show tonight. William Bernanke from CG Analytics is going to join us. We're going to talk about the Sweet 16 and what happened in the first two rounds last week. Also, another edition of Handicapper's Corner with special guest Adam Burke. Ralph Michaels and Dave Cokin are in studio tonight when we break down all 16 Sweet 16 matchups. And, of course, at the end of the show, best bets once again. Mark Seidel's behind the controls. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. It's time to get this party started, and let's welcome in tonight's first guest, William Bernanke. He's the manager at CG Analytics. You can follow William on Twitter at the Moneyline Guy. Check him out all season long. Good information there. And let's get into what happened last week first. Will, welcome to the show. How's it going, buddy? Rough week last week. Not rough talking as just rough on us. I know from my side of the counter, very grueling week. You want to watch all of these games. They start at noon. They go to the end. I can't imagine life for you guys at the Sportsbook.
Yes, it's most important thing is getting enough sleep, and I think then you'll have your focus the next day. Because if you try to get everything done in one day and become sleep deprived on a Thursday, it carries over into a weekend. So everything's all good on my end. Not my first rodeo.
All right. Last week, first two rounds. Overall, was it a winning first two rounds for the house or a losing first two rounds?
It was a winning first two rounds. We did fairly well. It could have been better if some of the bigger favorites did not. It could have been better, but some of the bigger favorites not covering really did help us. We'll get into that next, but. Just for example, the Baylor being Gonzaga.
Yeah, this is a point where, Will, you had 16 favorites win straight up in the second round. They went 11-5 against the spread. Now, normally, that's not a good outcome for the house when you've got all those favorites winning like that, because we know the general public, they're geared to playing overs and playing favorites. But we've seen over the last several years, Will, the bettors are becoming a little more sophisticated, hopefully thanks to shows like ours where we're trying to teach them and educate them. But you're seeing more play for the dogs than you used to. So what could have been a disaster of a day, Saturday and Sunday for you guys, wasn't as bad as it could have been. Exactly,
Marco. You actually said what I was going to reiterate that point. The second round was choppy, but the favorites winning covering is not necessarily a bad thing for us, because a lot of those second-round underdogs were sort of public dogs. So, as you were saying, the bettors now, more information, better educated to make better decisions, are betting some underdogs, and those drive those prices down. So bettors who come in late to take those dogs are not getting the best of number, and they're losing on those plays. So that's where we made some money on some of those favorites covering.
Speaking of making money, who was the MVP for the house last week? Which game brought you guys the biggest score?
Well, there was a few games, so just going to run down the games that helped us, the games that weren't so good, because they were pretty close. I wouldn't want to say one is so far ahead of the other. Purdue actually covering over Nova was a huge for us. That was a surprising that would be the case. But, yeah, a lot of love for Nova, defending champs, and they went down. That was big. Florida State covering against Murray State. I mean, that was the bigger game. I believe that was the Saturday game. Big public dog there, especially after their first-round performance against Marquette. Murray State had a lot of love, and they went down there, and it was unexpected by bettors, I'm sure. They thought it would be closer. Teasers, too. A lot of Murray State teasers and money line plays, so those money line parlays were all knocked out. Baylor covering number against Gonzaga was huge. They kind of did that in the second half. Didn't look good for a while. And some of the outrights that were huge were Baylor beating Syracuse and Florida beating Nevada. Those were big. And as far as the games for the best results for the customers, for our bettors, I think we all know the Michigan beating Montana. We heard about the big bet that was made on Michigan on that money line. That was also a public play, and they came in for bettors. UCF beating VCU was good for the bettors. Liberty, an underdog, beating Mississippi State outright was also huge for bettors. They were really all over them, both sides of money line. And then Houston covering against Ohio State. That was also we needed that on Sunday, and that was a tough result for us.
Will, as we move forward to the Sweet 16, what game has gotten the most money? Not necessarily sharp or square money, but just the most money bet on it so far?
It's Florida State Gonzaga seeing the biggest handle thus far.
Interesting. And any one side that they're taking there?
It's a little bit, it's fairly even. Earlier this morning, I would say Florida State, but it's kind of leveled off now.
All right. What games have taken the most of what you would consider sharp money so far?
It's Purdue. Purdue seeing some sharp money at plus 1.5. In fact, I'm going to check the number right now. What we have, if it might have came back to that. Yeah, it actually came back to 1.5, but we saw some sharp play at 1.5, and that by far. It's shaping up almost as a pros versus Joes. We have about 65% of the cash is coming in on Purdue right now, in the underdog, and looks like there's been more tickets written on Tennessee.
Yeah, and that's one of these cases, Will, where sometimes you got to be careful and don't overreact to the last thing you saw. And I always use the phrase, no team is as good as their best game, nor are they as bad as their worst game. And we definitely saw some teams last week that had, a monumental performance, and people, remember what they saw last, and that carries over in the betting the following week. Since we talked last week, Will, now that we've gotten through the first two rounds, has there been any game that you've seen somebody take a big bet to win it all? Have you gotten any big future bets?
Yeah, nothing too, nothing crazy, but we've taken a couple of decent-sized wagers on Auburn, Florida State, Kentucky, and Texas Tech, teams that have looked good, so bettors have just added on there. And, of course, we're still getting our usual Duke and Gonzaga, smaller plays, but they're just adding up the ticket count, their liability.
Will, we know that we see more and more betting opportunities of different ways to bet these games. Props, we know how popular they are in the Super Bowl. Have you guys been putting up props for the big dance, and will we have some for the Sweet 16? Yeah,
Sweet 16 we will have a little bit more concentrated props because the games will be more isolated. Early on we were doing alternate totals, team totals, alternate spreads, things of that nature. Nothing to the really too detailed. But as far as how it's going, action's been good. A lot of these props have been bet. Since you can get plus money on some of the alternate spreads, bettors have been hitting those, and they're certainly fun.
The props, obviously, yes, they are fun. Is there any type of prop that you see that the bettors like more? Do they like team totals? Do they like player props? Where do you see, when you do put up the props, the most action?
Oh, by far, so far it's been the alternate spreads because of the plus money payouts they can get with a big favorite or a let's say a -2 or something like that. And bettors are looking to get the big score, and they'll take an alternate spread, a -2 to like a -7 or something like that, and it's paid out for some of them, and of course some been good for us as well. But they have been the most popular. But I'm sure once we hit the Elite Eight and Final Four, and we have some player props up, some of the bigger names, we'll see the handle go way up.
Will, you guys have properties all over town, many of them right there on the Strip. How was it for the opening two rounds? The sports books packed? How deep were the lines?
Oh, they're crazy. I mean, unfortunately, the lines are still very long, and no matter how much you could be blue in the face talking about our app and how they have to get it, and I mention it to people even online. You guys ever think about getting the app? It'd save you some time, but some people just like that old school feel of talking to someone at the counter and having that ticket in their hand. And maybe it's a lucky thing, who knows? But that's what people like to do. But the action was great. It's getting better than ever. Every year it gets better.
Yeah, well, that was my segue, Will, to talk about the app for sure. I tell people all the time, you've got to get the app. Download a couple of the apps. When you come to Vegas, make a couple stops where you're going. CG should be absolutely one of them. Download the app, put some money in the account. It's going to take you about the same time as it is to stand in a line and make a wager. Once you have that app, you can be anywhere in Las Vegas. You could be watching the games poolside in a cabana with the games on the TV there and making bets, not have to move. Or you could be sitting in the sportsbook, getting the sportsbook feel while you're there, but not having to deal with the line. You're sitting there punching in your bet from the comfort of your chair and watching all of the action. And if you want to bet in-game, it is the absolute must. You have to have the app. It's so much fun. You're watching the games. You get a feel for the flow of the game, and you want to jump in on the over-under in-game, jump in on the money line, whatever it is. The app is the way to go. And the biggest myth that people don't realize is they think you have to live in Nevada. You don't. You only have to be in Nevada when you're using the app. So while you're visiting, you can use it the entire time you're here. When you're done, and before you check out to head home, just go and withdraw the money out of the account. It's the same as cashing a ticket before you leave. You're just taking the money out of the account and taking it home with you. The account will still be there next time you come back to Vegas. If you make frequent trips, that is the way to go. I highly advise everybody to do the app when they are in town.
Oh, absolutely. It's a must, and we're still giving away free money up to $68, new sign-up bonus, if you do, download the app and sign up for an account. And you can go to any place, any one of our 8 properties, the Cosmopolitan, Venetian, Palazzo, Tropicana, Palms, the M, Silverton, or Hard Rock, so you can avoid the lines and bet like a pro. And if you want to still be at the book, you can just sit there while everyone else is waiting in line, and you make your bets and laugh all the way to the bank.
That's good stuff, Will. I appreciate you joining us this week. I'm going to wish you luck, but I'm only going to wish you luck on those ones that I'm not on, buddy. I got to root for myself on my games, but best of luck this week. We appreciate you coming on each and every week and sharing that information from behind the counter. He is William Bernanke. Once again, you can follow him at the Money Line Guy. He is the manager at CG Analytics. Will, we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the games, my friend. Get some rest.
Yeah, you too. And I'll talk to you next week. Looking forward to it.
All right, don't forget, Thursday, baseball starts as well. No rest for the weary. And that's going to be it for our first segment tonight. I'm going to step out for a quick break. When I return, I'm going to have Adam Burke in studio live, our special guest tonight. We'll have Ralph Michaels as well in studio for that segment. And then later in tonight's show, Ralph, Dave, myself, and Adam's going to sit in as well. We're going to break down the Sweet 16. 16 games for you. We'll break it down next here, or excuse me, the 8 games, 16 teams, up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're going to head to Handicapper's Corner. And usually we're talking about basketball and the tournament in this segment. But, guys, baseball starts on Thursday. I know I'm excited about the start of baseball. That's been my bread and butter, no question about it, the last several years. And we've brought in for you guys today, special treat. Brought them all the way from Cleveland, Ohio. My God, I got all these Cleveland people around me. I don't know how I can manage this, but we've got Adam Burke. You can follow him at Skating Tripods and at bangthebook.com. Has a daily radio show there. And Ralph Michaels in studio with us. You can follow him at Cal Sports LV, regular guest on your show. Our other buddy Brian Leonard's on there quite often. Adam, welcome to the show. And busy time for you, baseball kicking off.
Yeah, glad to be here. And baseball coinciding with the NCAA tournament and, an earlier start to the baseball season this year. So been very busy, but you know what? Wouldn't really have it any other way.
Marco, we got to jump back, and people are going to say, a Twitter handle of Skating Tripods, okay, I got to know. And, I've known Adam a long time, and Corey Kluber, again, Cy Young winner Corey Kluber, pointed out that he thought Adam's Twitter handle was one of the coolest he's ever heard. So, Adam, tell us about it, because Skating Tripods has to have an explanation.
It does. So, I was a really bad JV hockey player in high school, but I got caught on with some older buddies of mine. We played on a beer league team called the Skating Tripods, and our logo was a shocker. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. We drank a lot, and I guess I kind of took over the name after the team disbanded.
Imagine that. Another guy from Cleveland that was drinking a lot. That seems like a prerequisite from you guys from Cleveland.
You know our sports history, right?
Well, this is true. The drive, the fumble. You were a little younger for those, though.
The
but
shots.
I
Don't
mean,
forget the shot.
I have 97. I have the Indians blowing the 3-1 lead in the ALCS in 2007.
Jose
I was at every playoff game in 2016, so I've had my fair share, too.
All right, good stuff. You've got, speaking of good stuff, Adam, you put together a very comprehensive baseball book. It's a baseball season win total preview. All 30 teams, you break them down. Division, pennant, World Series futures. You can find it at Amazon. Tell us a little bit about the book, and we want to hear about your daily radio show and where everybody can find it and what all you do.
Yeah, I do a lot over at bangthebook.com, and, we got a very talented cast of writers over there, and primarily we want to give out information. My goal has always been to sort of, in a way to turn a phrase, lead people to water, but I don't want to make them drink. I want them to have all the information in front of them, be able to make the decision for themselves. So that's what we do at bangthebook.com, and really what I've tried to do on Bang the Book Radio as well, which, as you mentioned, a daily radio show that I do basically about the second week of August all the way through the NCAA tournament. And then once we get into the spring and summer months, I do a twice-a-week podcast called The Bettor's Box on Mondays and Thursdays, focusing only on baseball. But as far as the guide goes, I've wrote these comprehensive season win total previews for, I believe this is the 6th year that I've done it now. The 2nd year that we've had it on Amazon as a guide you can download for Kindle, or if you don't have a Kindle or a Fire or anything like that, you can get the Amazon app, the Kindle app for Android or for Apple devices. But I break down every team from a season win total standpoint. I look at some positive and negative regression, situations. I look at some outliers, and as you mentioned, did all the future stuff as well. So it also helps me too. I mean, it gets a lot of information out there for everybody, but making that transition from football and basketball to baseball, I get to dive into all the information, and it sort of helps me organize my thoughts as well.
Well, it is a great publication, and if you're doing any of your own handicapping, it is a must to get. And we're going to get in a little bit some free plays from Adam, a few plays that he likes this year for baseball with some of his futures. Adam, baseball, we've talked about the new wave of handicappers, the majority of them. Sabermetrics is a big part of it, advanced metrics and everything. How much of that are you, and do you go deep into sabermetrics?
Yeah, one of the things I tried to do this year, I tried to streamline and simplify the guide a little bit. I mean, I used to have upwards of 3,500, 4,000 words in these team previews. This year, I kind of shortened a lot of them down into the 2,000 range, but a lot of it is, analytically driven. It's very numbers heavy because I think really that's the best way to handicap baseball with all the data that's available, all the data that's out there, and so I use a lot of sabermetrics in the guide, use a lot of sabermetrics on the show, but I do feel like one of my best assets in terms of the role that I have is to make those a little bit more relatable, make those a little bit more comfortable for people to use just because of the way that I present the data. So, they are very numbers heavy, and I know that can scare a lot of people, but, again, I mean, these are a lot of times sabermetric statistics are things you can see with your eyes. They're just quantified in a way that shows exactly, how much of an impact that's having, whether it's on a team level or on an individual level.
Going to this season, how about some teams that you're high on? You think there's value maybe with the season win total or with the divisions? I know that a lot of people, and I'll be honest, I'm one of them, that when it comes to futures with baseball, unless it's on betting a pennant or something, I don't bet a lot of the season win totals. And the reason I don't is I don't like tying my money up for 6 months on a proposition that's, going to be an even money return, basically. I want something, if I'm going to tie it up for 6 months, I want a return for that if I cash. And then also have an opportunity at the end of the season possibly to put myself in a positive EV situation with hedging opportunities. But there are values, and I know our good buddy Brian Leonard, he makes a lot of money every year with his baseball season win totals. That's something he looks forward to. And back in the day, it seems like it's only been 2 years since they've been coming out in Vegas first. But Reno at the Atlantis was always the first sports book that would bring out the season win totals. And Brian and I would make a trip to Reno for the weekend they were bringing those out, because Brian wanted to attack those season win totals because he feels that there is that much value in them. Do you have any that you feel you got some pretty good value with?
Yeah, I think there are definitely some that have some equity, and I should preface this by saying that more often than not, I don't get invested in the really good teams or the really bad teams. I want the teams that have a higher variance of outcomes. I want the teams that have a higher range of potential outcomes. So, for example, the Yankees are going to be very good. We all know that. The Red Sox will be very good. Astros will be very good. Meanwhile, the Orioles will be really bad. The Marlins will be really bad, although I do like their under a little bit because of the strength of the division. But I'm looking for situations where I feel like I've got a wide range of outcomes to the point where I think that there is an edge relative to the line. And as you mentioned, you do have to weigh the risk reward of tying your money up for upwards of 6-7 months before your bet is actually graded. But because of the way that I study baseball, because of some of the metrics that I use, and just because of the way that I evaluate these teams from a depth standpoint, or try to figure out where they're going to be come trade deadline time, I think there are some opportunities there with that. So one that, in fact, has already started and unfortunately is off to an 0-2 start. I did like Oakland over the season win total at 83.5. This is a team that won 95, 96 games last year, and they're not really that different of a team here this year. Some injuries have popped up. Some places may still have this one open, even though they played a couple of games. But did like Oakland. I like Pittsburgh. I know that that's music to your ears. The Pirates, their season win total is 77.5. They won 82 games last year, and while the division is maybe a little bit stronger in the sense that the Reds aren't the same kind of bottom feeder, the Cubs are going to take a step back. The Brewers will take a step back. The Cardinals, may be the best team here in this division, but I think they're still pretty flawed as well. So I think the Pirates are a team that, I don't see them being any worse than last season. So, for their season win total to come in, 4.5 games under where they were last year, when I think that they're better this year, I think I have some wiggle room there with that. So that's one that I definitely took a look at. I love their bullpen. I think they have a top 3 bullpen in baseball. I think their rotation is very clearly in the upper half of the league, and I think their offense is good enough to get by. So I think the Pirates over 77.5 is a good one. The Royals under 69.5, and maybe this kind of goes against what I said a little bit earlier about staying away from really bad teams, but I don't think people realize just how bad this team could be. Worst bullpen in baseball on paper, the very below average starting rotation, and the offense, while it's interesting with a lot of guys that steal bases and can do some fun things, they're just going to be a very low average, low on-base percentage team. And the biggest thing nowadays about scoring runs is that you have to capitalize on a lot of opportunities because strikeout rates are so much higher than they've ever been before. Well, when it comes to the Royals, they just don't have a lot of guys that, put balls in play with quality contact. I think it's going to be very tough for them to capitalize on those opportunities. So because the pitching staff is bad and the offense isn't going to score a whole lot of runs, under 69.5 with Kansas City is another one I like.
Let me throw something at you, Adam. One of the other reasons that I don't get into season win totals a lot is that when you're betting some of those fringe teams, the middle of the road, and you're hovering around that 500 mark for over or an under, you also have to worry about where that team is at the trade deadline. Because the trade deadline, if they're a buyer, can sell you over the win total. But if they're on the fringe and they become a seller, that over bet you can rip it up because the second half of the season becomes a mail-in if they get rid of a good star. So that's one of the things that concerns me sometimes with those middle of the road teams.
Yeah, it's a fair concern. And a lot of times what you want to look to do is you sort of want to look at the contract situations of those teams. How many impending free agents do they have? How many rental players? Because the trade acquisition cost at the trade deadline, you always pay a premium because there are only so many sellers. But if it's a guy that, is a rental player, that team's going to be more likely to give him up and a team's going to be more likely to pay that price. If it's a guy that has a year and a half or, even more than that on his contract, it's a much tougher negotiation for both sides. So if you've got a lot of teams that have, rental players that are definitely going to be traded in July if the team's out of contention, that's a big concern, obviously. But if you've got a lot of pre-arbitration guys or arbitration-eligible guys, it's less likely that they'll get moved. So I'm less concerned about those teams in the middle unless they have, those impending free agents that are almost certainly going to be traded.
Yeah, and last year, and again, it's my Pirates, so I follow them, very closely. For the first time in eons, the Pirates became a buyer at the trade deadline last year instead of a seller. And that there was a lot of sharp people that took the Pirates under last year, and they got burnt because the Pirates exceeded expectations last year, and it was because I feel they were aggressive. They went out and got Archer at the trade deadline, which I think is probably him and Musgrove are the two key factors for the Pirates. If Archer can regain any of that form that he had 2 years ago, great acquisition for the Pirates, and they're going to get a lot of durability out of him. And if Musgrove can stay healthy, he's a guy that I feel has got some talent, but just always is battling those injuries. He's another guy that can get there.
Yeah, I think the thing with Archer, there are a couple of positives in Archer's direction. One of them is that this will be his first full season outside of the American League East. And even though Tropicana Field is actually pretty good for pitchers, it was 24th in home run park factor last year. When you go on the road in the AL East and you're pitching in Toronto, which is a very good hitter's park, obviously we all know Boston, New York are very good hitter's parks, that's challenging for somebody like Archer, who does have a knack for giving up home runs. He's a two-pitch pitcher, so if you're a hitter in the batter's box, you got a 50-50 shot at guessing correct with him. So I think going over to the National League, where everybody still knows that scouting report, but the NL Central ballparks aren't nearly as hitter-friendly. PNC Park definitely trends and slants to the pitcher side of things. I think this could be, a spot where Archer does put it all together. Obviously, there's been a lot of, positive feedback for pitching coach Ray Searage. So I think Archer's a guy that could take a step forward. I like Musgrove a lot. Love what Jameson Taillon did last year after incorporating his slider a little bit more in late May. He had elite-level stats over the final 4 months of the season. And we'll probably talk about this a little bit in terms of, game-by-game betting strategies and tips, but Trevor Williams is a really interesting guy. Now, he will not be as good as he was in the second half last year. I promise you that. I know there's no such thing as a lock in this business. Trevor Williams not being as good as his second half was last year is a lock. But a lot of these guys that people expect regression from, that had a low ERA and a higher FIP or a higher XFIP, which is fielding independent pitching, and then XFIP is fielding independent pitching, regress to a league average home run percentage. One of the things I've really focused on a lot here lately in the StatCast era is exit velocity, because, and this is an obvious point to make, but the harder you hit the ball, the more likely you are to have success with it. Well, Trevor Williams is a guy that really does a good job avoiding hard contact. So that's a guy that maybe has more sustainability than people think because he's able to stay off the barrel. And once you get down below 91, 92 miles per hour of average exit velocity, batting average and slugging percentage really drop dramatically. That's something that Musgrove is getting better at, something that Williams is getting better at. And, to talk about another team in the NL Central, that's something the Brewers have focused on a ton with their starting pitchers. They've had a lot of success with it. Teams are just trying to look for new edges, and I think contact management is one of them.
Moving to some tips for day-to-day handicapping, what if you were getting somebody that's never bet before and you wanted to give them a few things to get them started in the right direction, what would you tell them to do in baseball?
I think one of the first things, and we talk about betting numbers instead of teams. You want to get line value as much as possible, and if you are somebody that's interested in arbitrage for Major League Baseball, you do have the opportunity to do this. That's not really a novice concept by any means, but if you go to Fangraphs.com and you look at, say, Trevor Williams' player page, you're going to see a very low ERA and a high XFIP. What that means is that the quant crowd, the stats-heavy crowd, the analytics crowd, that's the group that moves lines. They're going to look at a guy like Trevor Williams and say, okay, he has a low ERA, a high FIP, a high XFIP. They're going to bet against him. So if you want to take the Pirates with Trevor Williams on the mound, wait that line out. Now, on the flip side, somebody like a John Gray for Colorado, high ERA in the 5.30 range, low XFIP in, I believe it's the 3.60, 3.70 range. That's a guy that the market's going to bet on. So if you want to get some line value, go to FanGraphs. They have a probable pitchers page. You can check that out. You can get in front of a lot of line moves without even knowing necessarily what you're doing, but just looking at that gap between ERA and XFIP. If it's a high ERA and a low XFIP, that line is moving on that guy. If it's a low ERA and a high XFIP, that line is moving against that guy.
Now, my answer to that is, doesn't the guy setting the lines have the opportunity, the same information? Why are they screwing it up and putting the numbers up wrong?
I think it's one of those things where, and maybe this changes. And I do talk to some people out here in the industry that, are not necessarily calling them line originators, but they are people that, do have some influence in how the books set things. And, I think that crowd is starting to become a little bit more numbers savvy, a little bit more in tune with sabermetrics. So maybe some of those edges will be going away, but at the same time, you're basically banking on the likelihood of positive or negative regression. And so it's one of those things where if the books aren't seeing it, they don't really want to set the line expecting it. They'll let the betting public do that for them. And so that's why we still have edges like that.
Is it just, what's the market from your best guesstimate? What's the market of people betting baseball on with advanced statistical information compared to Joe Public just betting it because this team's hot, has won 4 in a row, and there's a named pitcher on it? Is the Joe Public market enough to offset that analytical market where, Vegas is putting out a number where they're getting equal money on both sides because of that?
It certainly could be. I would say, in terms of the crowd that moves lines, a lot of them would be the modeling crowd, again, the quant crowd that uses a lot of this sabermetric analysis. I would say somewhere between 3 and 5% of the market, probably. But those are the people that, eventually put the numbers where they should be, and then the public comes in and sort of picks up the scraps or, maybe drives the number back down a little bit. I do see that regularly where, a line will move on the overnights or something like that. Then the public will come in and sort of bump that number back down some. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's just that it's such a small percentage of people jumping on these openers, jumping on some of these sabermetric numbers that the sports books just aren't that worried about them.
We know volume-wise, baseball is probably the least in volume for the sports books, but any sports book director that you will talk to, they tell you that they fear baseball more than any other sport because you are dealing with true odds, the money line, and the majority of the people that are betting baseball are more of what you would put on the sharper side of the ledger. You don't have all of that public money like you would have in the NFL. So with that said, let's move to one more area with the futures. Do you have anybody that you like as far as a division or a World Series?
I will say this, to the last point that you made before we get into the futures stuff, a lot of people have made that pivot from daily fantasy to handicapping, and specifically on the baseball side, because daily fantasy sets up so well for baseball. Fantasy baseball, has been around forever, and that's a group of modelers, basically. So, that's a group of people that already has some of the infrastructure. So, that's probably why we are seeing an increased betting handle for baseball here, is that some more of that money has crept into the market, and those are people that do, understand a lot of these concepts. To your question about futures, look, this is going to sound like a homer pick because at the beginning you mentioned that I'm from Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Even with the injuries that the Indians have had, they're still very likely to win the American League Central Division. They're anywhere from minus 350 to minus 400. So, they're in that 75 to 80% implied probability range to make it to the playoffs, and most importantly, avoid the one-game wild card play-in. That'll probably end up being, either Boston or New York, and then Tampa Bay, Oakland, maybe Minnesota, something like that. So the Indians have a very high probability of getting a home series, or not getting a home series, but getting a full series in that first round of the playoffs. So by default, their World Series futures ticket has some value because that's a very easy hedge for you. They will be a dog no matter who they play in the first round, but that is an easy hedging possibility for a team that's very likely to win its division, and you're not paying the same premium like you are with Houston or the Dodgers, who are also in that same 75 to 80% range to win their respective division. I mentioned Pittsburgh as a season win total that I like. I think there's some equity on them to win the National League Central, also to win the National League pennant. And I think one other team that you could really start to look at here at this point in time would be Minnesota, because of the Indians' injuries, because that Minnesota price is in the 25 to 30 to 1 range to win the World Series last I checked. That's a team that, look, if the Indians have one more major injury, all of a sudden their lineup becomes very questionable. And the Twins, again, if you win that division, you avoid that wild card game. That's what you want to look for in terms of a pennant or a World Series future.
Great stuff, Adam. You can follow Adam on Twitter, Adam Burke, at Skating Tripods. Be sure to check him out at bangthebook.com. Adam, I'd love to have you on during the season, different times, to talk about the baseball season, and especially once we get going, there's going to be teams that are playing above their head, so to speak. Are these teams for real, or are they playing over what the true numbers, the advanced metric numbers say, and should we expect regressions on these teams in season? And these are the things where you can get in front of teams that are over or undervalued for day-to-day sports betting. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that, and that those are concepts I do talk about on that Bettor's Box podcast on Mondays and Thursdays, and you can find that at bangthebook.com. And also, if you want, I talk about it all the time on the show. You can email me to get on my list for the notes for the concepts and things I talk about on the Bettor's Box. So tune in on Thursday. I'll be having my first one of the season here, and you'll get my email address at that point in time, and you can get on the list for notes.
All right, great stuff, Adam. Appreciate you coming in. We're going to take a quick break, guys. When we come back, it is Sweet 16 time. We're going to preview all of the games on Thursday and Friday. Thursday's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Tonight's College Basketball Sweet 16 Preview Thursday edition brought to you by uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus using promo code WT50 when signing up. This offer is exclusive to WagerTalk members. All right, guys, it's here, Sweet 16. That's what we were waiting for, and we're here. We're going to start with you, Ralph. Thursday night, Purdue and Tennessee. Tennessee, 1-point favorite, over under 146. How are you seeing this one?
Tennessee is a team to me that is playing really well, but I just cannot jump on the bandwagon. I just, I watch them, and, yes, when you have Grant Williams, a back-to-back SEC Player of the Year, only the first time in 24 years that's happened, when you have a team that has their top 6 scorers are all on the team for at least a third straight year. That's the kind of team you want in March Madness, a team that's experienced, that's played together, that's productive. But, you have Purdue, a team that's been to the Sweet 16 3 straight years. It's a game I've gone back and forth in. And I like the Big Ten. It's tougher competition. But Tennessee has burned me enough where I can't like them, but I can't play against them.
Well, Rick Barnes, who I talked about frequently, and we saw some real Rick Barnes in the first 2 rounds. They've got a big early lead against Colgate, kind of screw around in that game, and that's with it's Colgate, okay? Good toothpaste, not that much of a basketball university.
It's the 7th team in the Big Ten, or 8th team?
Well, and they've got them hammered early. And then even more spectacular fashion, what took place on Sunday, where they almost got in the record books by blowing a 25-point lead, and they happen to win the game in overtime. But you see this all the time. Barnes is one of those coaches who coaches not to lose rather than to win. They should have won that game by 40 over the weekend. They had their team dead to rights, and they let them back in the game by standing around on offense, which completely took them out of their flow. Now they start making mistakes on offense. They're not getting back on defense. They were completely stagnant. You can't make those mistakes as you get deeper in the tournament because you're facing really good quality teams. And if you continue to coach in that fashion, you're going to get burned. So I look at this game, and one of the philosophies I had, and it's really the philosophy I had going into this tournament, was to find the team that's going to get extra possessions. So I'm valuing offensive rebounding, and I'm valuing turnovers, and of course valuing shooting percentage as well, but really putting a stress in those first 2. And if you match up Purdue and Tennessee, the Volunteers have an edge in those categories.
Number 3 in the country turnover to assist ratio.
Right. It's really outstanding, okay? Yeah. They don't give the ball away as a rule. But then you see what happened Sunday where they had like 10 turnovers in the second half because they were standing around. So I don't feel safe with a Tennessee lead here. And I'm going to tell you something. If this comes down to a coaching matchup in game, I give Painter the edge over Barnes. I think, it's on paper. I think Tennessee. But with my money, it's probably going to be nobody.
It was Schofield on the bench the whole second half, almost scored 17 in the first half for Tennessee, was in foul trouble, only played a few minutes, only played 2 minutes. And
never played in the overtime, interestingly enough.
And like you said, Barnes can't make that adjustment with one of your guys out.
And this was against Iowa.
Yeah, they couldn't make the adjustment with a player being out, which can always happen. So I agree with that sentiment completely.
I haven't locked into a side here, but I'm looking at it this way, and if I'm leaning any way, I'm leaning to Tennessee. I think that the public is going to look at what they saw last, and what they saw last was a Purdue team that absolutely dismantled the national champ, defending national champ Villanova. Villanova, we know, had their flaws this year. That game just got completely out of control early. In Purdue, unlike Tennessee, never took their foot off the gas. They kept rolling. So the public sentiment, I think, is going to lean to Purdue in this game, plus the fact all the love that the Big Ten has gotten so far from their results, and rightfully so, they've gotten all these teams in there. Them in the ACC, it's a stock-filled, Sweet 16.
SEC still got 3, too.
SEC.
4, excuse me. They got 4.
But the Big Ten had everybody advance except, yes, Ralph, I know, except Wisconsin.
Crab legs.
Yeah, okay. The guy has not stopped her. You weren't at videos today, Dave.
No.
9-1 I went last week. The only game I lost last week during the big dance was the frickin' crab leg bet with him. And now we're going to Florida next week, or this weekend. I got to take him to the Joe's Crab. I don't even know if we can get in on this weekend.
There's no reservations there.
There's no reservations. All you got to do is tip the maitre d' enough.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get some green out for the maitre d'. That's one of those style restaurants. It's the Joe's here. You can make reservations. And by the way, if you're coming to Las Vegas, 702-792-9222. I know that number well. But the original Joe's at South Beach, there are no reservations.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll have to get down there. So now I got to tip the maitre d'. I got to buy you crab legs. I think I'm going to buy out of this bet and just tell him I'm going to get him always Miller Lite that he wants the entire weekend, and he'll probably go for that.
I grew up around a restaurant called Twin Oaks in Cranston, Rhode Island. I think it's still there. Absolutely great spot. Phenomenal food. The baked stuffed shrimp is the best on the planet, okay? They make it with a Ritz cracker.
Oh, nice.
So, it's incredible.
Dave's getting all excited when
no,
he said
God,
that.
I love Twin Oaks. But the thing is, Twin Oaks didn't take reservations. So, and it was like a 2-hour wait. Unless you walked up and shook hands with Joe Zito or Phil, I forget, Phil Roselli, something like that. I can't remember. So long ago, I can't remember his last name.
In other words, yeah.
Well, yeah. You shake hands and there's a $20 bill in the hand, and all of a sudden your table opened up in like 10, 12 minutes. So I would suggest it's probably not $20 anymore. But
no, I was going to say $20. That would be a no-brainer.
You wait longer.
Yeah.
But if you fold together the right amount of cash, you'll be sitting down pretty quickly and enjoying a great meal.
I'm happy to just belly up to the bar.
Yeah,
that's true too.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So slight lean for Tennessee there, and restaurant review from Dave. Let's move on to the next one, Dave. We'll start with you. Any restaurants you like in Oregon or Virginia?
I'm not familiar with Oregon. I don't know if I've ever been there. I've been in Virginia, but that's too long ago. Can't remember. Good beaches, I can tell you that. Beaches, it's unlike most Atlantic Ocean beaches. The water is the perfect temperature in the summer, so you can really enjoy yourself.
Nice.
As for the basketball game, which game is this?
This is Oregon and Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Virginia's -8.5.
Yeah, okay.
Total of 119.
Yeah, early play on Virginia by the betting public, or the market, we'll put it that way. And it's going up to 8.5. It's tough to argue against that, because as well as Oregon has done down the stretch, and a phenomenal coaching job by Dana Altman, who had to reconfigure the whole team after Bull went out, and it looked like the season was done. I mean, they were, as Pritchard was saying after the game on Sunday, it's like, hey, we weren't even going to be an NIT team. Look, and he was talking about the NIT like it's, he's reconstructed this team, and they're really effective right now, so they're not really a 12 seed. Okay, that's a bad seeding on Oregon. It's kind of the correct seeding based on what they did during the season, but obviously they're not playing a 12 seed. Now they're playing like a 4 or a 5 seed. And you still wonder if Virginia's really playing like a 1 seed. They still didn't have the first half against Gardner-Webb was unimpressive. And, they got rid of him in the second half, but big deal. They were good enough against Oklahoma, but I don't think anyone would look at that and say, wow, what a great performance. They were supposed to handle Oklahoma, and they did. It was a comfortable margin for most of the game, so I'm not diminishing what they did. And that makes it a little bit scary here because the numbers clearly indicate Virginia, and not close. Okay, I mean, on paper, this is about a 12-point game. But there's been a little adjustment because of the way Oregon's playing. And Oregon is that team right now. They've got no pressure on them whatsoever. They're not supposed to be here. They weren't even supposed to be in the tournament. They had to win 4 in a row here in Las Vegas in the Pac-12 tournament just to get to the postseason. Those teams scare the hell out of me. I don't want to go against my numbers, particularly in the categories that I'm valuing the most. But I don't think I have enough confidence to go up there and say, all right, give me Virginia minus the points. It'll be Virginia or nobody for me, but I'm leaning more toward nobody right now.
Ralph, we know how much you love Oregon, so I'm just going to sit back and shut up and let you just ramble on about Oregon.
10 straight wins, 10 straight covers, 54 points per game, all 10 opponents under 42%, 7 of those 10 opponents under 34% in must-win games. But you look at Virginia, their last 12 games, nine teams under 40%. This number's low. I still like it under. I think it's the first team to 55 wins. There's 353 teams in Division I. Virginia's 353 in tempo. Oregon's number 328. And I can't bet Virginia. If there's a total where I think a team is going to score 55 points to win, and they're laying 15% of that, 8 or 8.5 points, I can't face them. I'm not saying I'm on Oregon, but I just can never bet Virginia because of that. I do like the under. Here's a round. In the Sweet 16 round, number 10 seeds or lower as a dog of 4 or more, 8-1 ATS the last 9. So, but see, I agree with Dave. Oregon's not a 12 seed where they're a MAC team that Virginia's going to look past. They're Oregon. They're Dana Altman. They're a team. They're a name. They've been to this tournament. They've advanced far in this tournament. So I don't think you get the same 12 seed mentality thought with the favorite as you do compared to other teams.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue my theme against Oregon. I can't argue anything that you guys have said. This team has exceeded all expectations, no question about it. As far as the Virginia side goes, Dave, I agree with you. Their wins were not impressive over the weekend. But I'll tell you what, if there was any team that came into the tournament with a big cinder block on their shoulders that had to carry it and get that monkey off their back, so to speak, this was the team.
That was my favorite game. I bet against Virginia week 1, took the dog, and then in live betting, I had Virginia minus 7.5. I said it was just a perfect scenario. Yeah,
they came back, and I think they're going to come out of that opening weekend now with confidence in, we got through that, everybody. Because those kids, think about every time they stepped in front of a microphone before that first round game. What was the question that was going to be asked?
And it showed in the first half against Gardner-Webb.
Absolutely. And now I think they move ahead. I think that this is a team that's going to do very well. I've been on them all year. I like Virginia. And here is a spot, one stat I'll throw, and then we're going to throw this back to you. Virginia, after a game where you had a combined score of 125 points or less this season, they've come back in the next game. They're 12-2 against the spread. Ralph, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, well, you talk about Virginia and their defense and their offense. This year's different. They have an offense. Adam's sitting with us in studio, Adam Burke, and, appreciated him having him earlier. If he finds a point here, he'll chime in. He gave this one to me, though. Kyle Guy, we know Kyle Guy is Virginia's offense. In that Oklahoma win, which they won and covered as a double-digit favorite, he went 2 of 15, 0 of 10 from three-point, and you still cover as a double-digit favorite against a decent Oklahoma team.
Yeah, with your main weapon. I think they get a big win here. Oregon going to get a lot of love. They've had now, another week to sit back after having the Pac-12 championship roll 4 games, 4 days, get that done, and then roll through their 2 teams.
Defense does travel, though.
Defense does travel, but they're facing the best defense that they have seen all year.
One of the top 5 in the country.
Yeah. Well, tell me who they faced that was better than Virginia this year.
Oh, UCLA. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
That's type.
I was going to say you weren't
from the
smoking
other
a cigarette
direction, Dave.
before we
You're
started.
looking from the wrong
I
end.
held the list upside down.
Yeah, there you go. All right, guys, let's go to one that's very intriguing game. There's some sidebars to this one. You've got Florida State playing Gonzaga. Florida State knocks Gonzaga out of the tournament last year.
Drilled them.
Stunning fashion. You've got Gonzaga minus 7.5. You got a total of 147.5. And you got a Florida State team that's coming in here off a wire-to-wire, easy win. Are they the new flavor of the week? A lot of love showing up talking Florida State. Here's a team that just scored 90 points, and they're looking at getting 7.5 here.
But
how do you see this?
Because they were supposed to. Okay, Florida State was not a surprise to me at all in the second round. Thought that was a great matchup for them, and they took advantage of it. Gonzaga is not a great matchup for them. Gonzaga is really good on the offensive glass. They're going to neutralize and, in fact, I think beat Florida State at that aspect of the game. I think Gonzaga takes better care of the basketball than Florida State, so I expect them to have extra possessions in this game. They shoot the ball better than Florida State. Now, the one thing you can weigh in there, if you want to make a case for the other side, is, well, yeah, all that's true, but they did it against mostly West Coast Conference competition, and that's why you have to factor in strength of schedule. And I do. Otherwise, I'd probably be looking at Florida State as like a 12-point dog in this game. With just factor in the strength of schedule, Florida State coming out of a very good league, arguably as good a league as there is, and Gonzaga coming out of a mid-major league with a couple of good teams, but still a mid-major league. I do factor that in, and that knocks some of the margin down for Gonzaga. Now, I don't care about the revenge factor, because to me, revenge is all about motivation. What, Florida State's not going to be as motivated as Gonzaga?
Exactly what I said
Come
to
on.
Kelly today at videos. You're in the Sweet 16. How much more motivated can you be?
That cracks me up when I hear.
Exactly what I said.
It's like when I hear which team's more motivated to play in the Super Bowl. What are you kidding? They're
I
both
agree.
motivated.
You know,
so I lean to Gonzaga in this game. I'm not chiseling it in stone yet that I'll play it. I have not yet issued an absolutely firm release. When I do, it'll be at WagerTalk, but certainly looking in Gonzaga's direction.
Ralph?
I am invested in the Zags. They are my top pick for the futures. I have more bet on them than any other team. So I am a Zags fan the entire way. And one thing I want to bring up for the Zags that people may have not noticed watching them is Killian Tilly. He's 6'11". He's a first-round draft choice. He's only played 12 games this year.
Now he's
been
healthy.
Hurt. He's only been playing 18 minutes, but he's starting to play more and more. He is going to be a difference maker moving forward, and I think that's such a huge edge with Rui Hachimura and Clark. I mean, now all of a sudden you have 3 players that are that caliber that can match up with
3
anyone.
NBA guys.
Yeah. Now
Hachimura is a tremendous player.
Talking about strength of schedule, though, this is the first top 25 team the Zags have played since December 15th. Leonard Hamilton is 6-1 as a March Madness dog. He's done well in the favorite role. He has let down, but as a dog, he's done well. And one thing that does concern me is Florida State with their guards, 6'4" and 6'5". They completely change passing lanes. Teams that normally make passes struggle the first 5-10 minutes against Florida State because those normal lanes aren't open or close very quickly. I am completely invested in the Zags to win it all. I actually lean with Florida State in this. I think their athleticism, they've got 11 guys that average between 10 and 32 minutes. They come at you at waves. They got a lot of multiple scores. To me, 7.5 is, I made the line 6, and I think there's a touch of value with Florida State, although I think Gonzaga wins the game, moves on, and hopefully knocks off Duke.
All right, Ralph. Shocker. Write it down.
We're disagreeing.
Could
it be a pod or a video, Marco, if we did?
I'm on Gonzaga here. I think Florida State, I think the road to this game for them, they caught a Vermont team that they were just plain and simple out. They outclassed that team. And then they got a Murray State team the game after a big upset.
Perfect matchup for them.
Yeah, and they didn't have
probably
the athletes.
The weakest 2 foes anyone's played.
Well, it's not weak. But Murray State, from a matchup standpoint, that was
they shut down Morant.
Worst,
that's all you had to do.
Basically, the worst team in the field. No, because they shut down everybody else. Hey, Morant, go ahead and have your points. But you're getting nothing else. And Florida State was just too big, too athletic for them. They killed them on the glass.
Absolutely. So now you're facing the Gonzaga team, number one offensive team shooting percentage. They shoot over 53% from the field for the season. Okay? There's teams that's a high point for them for the year. This is their average. They're sixth defensively in the country in shooting percentage. So, again, Florida State, they face some tough defenses in the ACC, Virginia Tech, Virginia, but not, now they're facing another one. But they're facing one that is got a two-headed monster. They can score. They can play defense, and here's the last part, and the most important part, when you are laying points. If this game is hanging around the number, it's sitting at 6, 7, 8 points, and they're fouling down the stretch, you've got one of the 18th best team in the country shooting foul shots, 73% from the field. So, in theory, if it gets to that point of the game where you're in around the numbers, which so many of these games are falling around the numbers, you get a team that can extend the lead at the foul line. I think that's huge. I like them. You've got all kinds of offensive. I want teams that can score at the end and are good at the foul line. That's what I got with Gonzaga. And I do put a little bit, I know that Florida State is motivated. Gonzaga doesn't want to get knocked out 2 years in a row by the same team. That's a little added motivation.
The one thing I will say about the Zags is a couple weeks ago I looked. There were only 2 teams in the country shooting 50% or higher away from home. The Zags were one of them, and number one in the country shooting 50.5% away from home.
UNLV the other. No, okay.
Again, you're looking at the wrong side.
Damn it.
Did anybody see what Dave was smoking before? He said he was going to have a cigarette.
It was an edible. It wasn't.
Okay, it wasn't a cigarette before we started.
I'm in a good mood.
There you go.
No, I am.
That's why we think you're drunk or high. Yeah,
you know why?
You're in a good mood.
No, and I'll tell you why.
You met
You're doing a pod with
me?
No.
Oh. And it does impact you. And I was talking about this on a podcast that I did earlier today. I went through in the later stages of January and throughout almost all of February. Every goddamn game that went down was going to be a coin flip in the last 2 minutes. I mean, I lost like 90% of them.
I can back that thought. I get
your
emails. Absolutely.
Yes, it was just son of a bitch. I mean, if I'd be...
You had a couple of years ago in baseball like that. Every game that went extra innings.
Yeah. That was the year I think I went 3-24 in extra inning games or something like that. Okay?
It's insane.
It was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it does. It can... Now, all of a sudden... It's going the other way. I'm winning every close game right now, in hockey and in basketball. And, and then the other games are doing well. So I'm real happy with the way things go. You know what it's like. I mean, you're on a big run right now. This is part of what doing this on a daily basis. It's not just throwing darts. I mean, you sweat these games. And I don't care when these people say, I just look at the scores. Bullshit, okay? Then you're not as invested in it emotionally as we are. But, yeah, I'm in a good mood right now because I'm winning all these games and my customers are happy and it's good. And it does,
the difference is, though, too, Marco, again, you and I know Dave, that there's services that put plays out to get your money and there's services that put plays out that bet those games that take every loss to heart, as the three of us do. And that's the difference. That we take these losses to heart.
I don't like losing.
And you have these back-to-back-to-back tough losses. It is just grinding on you. So completely understand. Glad the mood has changed and – we'll
quite frankly,
celebrate.
You were pretty irritable.
Yeah, you were a fucking pain to be with a couple months there.
All right.
I don't doubt it. I was, sullen. I was very sullen. I was like, am I ever going to win one of these goddamn
things? Your cat
even
called me and said, could you please give this guy a winner?
Bo likes everybody. He doesn't care.
All right. Going to the last one. Now, guys, this is an intriguing matchup with Texas Tech and Michigan.
Oh, boy.
You got two teams, and again, I think the public perception is the Big Ten is the king right now, and the Big 12, there's only one man left standing out of the Big 12.
It's the best one, though.
It is the best one, but you know what, Dave? We talked about this at videos today. Texas Tech has been there all year. They've been probably the most consistent team from the Big 12, but yet they don't get talked about on the national stage.
I disagree a little bit. In January, it was Iowa State and Kansas State, and they were third in the mix with Kansas.
But they still, it's still Kansas's conference.
Yeah, it is Kansas's league, right?
They were an afterthought for most of the year, Kansas in there, but people were still saying, okay, if Kansas wins this one, they still have a chance to keep that streak alive in the Big 12. It's like, look at the teams that are playing right now. And Texas Tech, to me, has been the most consistent team from start to finish in that conference. And I thought the Big 12 was a good conference this year. I think that it got tainted at the end.
A lot of
injuries to key players.
Yeah,
Kansas
West Virginia
State
is your worst team. That you have a good conference.
Yeah, West Virginia. We won't talk about them.
Well, that's. The word was debacle I used.
Yeah.
From the
Friday
NIT
night
game?
disaster, Monday night disaster. Yeah. So I apologize to everyone that bought that play. A team just didn't show up in March that had a losing record, didn't care, suspended their best player the first half. Nobody knew about it, and just no shit.
Unfortunately for me, I went against West Virginia the first game they played with that thinking, and they showed up for the first game in the tournament, whichever one they're in, and then yesterday they just. One of those ones. But, guys, let's get back to this one. Michigan, -2. You got a total of 126.5. You've got two very good defenses, obviously. Texas Tech, this is a team, their last 6 games down the stretch, they held their opponents to 38% or less in 5 of those 6 games. The only game that they didn't was the regular season finale against Iowa State on the road, which really was a throwaway game. This is a team that I think the wrong team's favored, in my opinion.
I don't know if the wrong team's favored. Well, but I can make a case for it from the standpoint of the
teams are even coaching edge Michigan.
There's no question. Michigan has a coaching edge. I would give
I'm not. Dave's waffling there.
I don't know. But I think Beard is a superstar.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. He hasn't been to as many of these events as Beeline, but I think Beard's a legit superstar coach. And
you got to get a team there first.
Okay, well, he's got one there. I mean, if they win this game, they're in the Elite Eight. So if you do the stat comparison on the categories that I keep talking about, which result in extra possessions, it's really close, but there is an actually slight edge to Texas Tech. And I rate the strength of schedule pretty close to even here because they both played in quality conferences, obviously. And the difference is Beeline has been through this before, which is a little bit of an advantage. But that, to me, is a bit offset by the fact that while they're not going to be noted as being an offensive juggernaut at any point because that's not the style they play, Texas Tech actually has the better offense in this game. Michigan's offense can get really stagnant and just have a whole lot of trouble finding open lanes and getting good looks. And you saw it in the second half. I thought they had that game completely under control, and yet they never really put it away to a margin where you were comfortable. I had Michigan minus the points, and I won the game. But until the last minute, I was not comfortable with that because they were making a lot of mistakes offensively. They're going to have to play. Michigan will have to play a better game than they played in the second round to survive the third round. I'm leaning to the Red Raiders.
Ralph?
Did a video on this today at WagerTalk. So, the same thought. I think the teams are so evenly matched to what your 1 and 3 defensive efficiency. Tempo is very slow. The difference is Texas Tech has Culver, a top high NBA draft choice. But, I look at Michigan and I say, yes, they should be able to beat anyone. But those 3 Michigan State games, they led 41-29. They got outscored 36-19. They led 35-23, got outscored 52-28. Led 51-45, got outscored 32-19. Now, there's an Ann Arbor writer who I love, and he is spot on with Michigan. And he said, watch out for Charles Matthews. He missed 3 games, the last 3 regular season games, came back in the tournament, only played 22 or 23 minutes per game in the 3 Big Ten tournaments. He is a lockdown defender. He's going to be on Jared Culver. And to me, it's this. If Jared Culver can score 20-plus points and keep his offense engaged, Texas Tech wins. If Matthews does shut him down, they don't have enough scores to get by. So I don't have an opinion on the game. I will absolutely watch the matchup. To me, it's the best personnel matchup of this entire Sweet 16 round, and I will be focused on it.
So is this a game, based on the way you're talking, once you can establish a particular flow in the game?
Live betting?
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
If Culver can break out and Matthews isn't playing like he would be with an elite defender, I absolutely agree. But to me, Charles Matthews is is Draymond Green, in the NBA. He's that type of defender. Now I'm using a Michigan State and a Michigan guy, so I guess I shouldn't do that, but you get the gist that, Michigan in the flow. But either way, I do like the under as well.
The last thing I'm going to say about this Texas Tech defense, granted it was Buffalo, granted it was out of the MAC, but this was the 6th highest scoring team in the country, Buffalo. They were averaging 84.4 points per game. This Texas Tech defense held them to 58.
Well, you don't become the number one defense in efficiency that's the exact reason why.
And they toyed with them.
Yeah.
And this is my point. Granted, the margins are close, Ralph, but I give Texas Tech the edge offensively, and I give them the edge defensively. And if you're giving me the edge both sides of the coin there, and you're giving me the points, I have to be on that. I think that's where the value is.
A thing to remember is this. When we look at Ken Palm efficiency ratings or anything like that, we say, oh, this team is 2 and this team is 4. There's a 2 difference. There's no number above 1. So the number from 1 to the next best team can be substantial, where you don't have – you can't say you're only 1 or 2 away. You don't know how far they would be, a -2 or a -3 in the rankings compared to everyone else. So keep that in mind when you're talking about the top of a list or the bottom of a list. You don't know how much further up or down they would be.
All right, guys, we're going to step out for a quick break. That wraps up the Thursday Sweet 16 games. When we come back, it's Friday. We're going to take a look at the 4 games, Sweet 16 on Friday. That's up next on the Wager Talk Podcast. Welcome back to the Wager Talk Podcast. It is Friday edition, Sweet 16. Guys, first game up on the docket, I think, is the toughest one for me to handicap of the 8. This one, we've got LSU and Michigan State. Michigan State, -6, 148.5. We all know what happened last week. Tom Izzo sticks his finger in a player's face. Ralph, do I ever do that to you?
No, we don't all know what happened, because, and I mentioned this yesterday, this is the important part of this, which everybody seems to be, first of all, I don't care if he yelled at guys.
He's a coach. He's supposed to yell at him.
The other end of it is, and nobody's mentioned this, none of the weenies are mentioning this. Next play out of the huddle, you know what was drawn up for? Kid he was yelling at. So he didn't send him to the bench or banish him to a timeout someplace.
Good point.
Came right back and drew up a play for the kid next play out. Nobody mentions that.
1 point for Dave.
No, 1 point for Izzo. He's a real basketball coach. He's a great coach. I would be, if I had a kid who was a quality basketball player and had a chance to play big-time basketball, I'd be real happy to send him to East Lansing to play for Tom Izzo.
Speaking of Tom Izzo, you got to say that he has to hold a major edge in this game coaching-wise.
Yeah, I think so.
Because of the interim coach for LSU. And with all those distractions, let's give LSU credit for keeping their head on straight, and getting through the first 2 rounds. Granted, they tried to lose the Maryland game today. They were in control of that game early on.
Well, you saw coaching late how important it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was it.
Although I got to say, they drew up a nice play for the end of the game. Yeah. And executed it and got out of there with the win.
A great point guard who could do that. Yeah,
Bedford's he's been a head coach. Okay,
North Texas. Yeah, 6 years I think.
And he wasn't terrible there. Okay, but it's Izzo against an assistant basically. That's
defensively. LSU's going to have trouble scoring in this game against this Michigan State defense.
Yeah, and Michigan State, I know they had some, and here's the thing, Michigan State didn't play its best game against Minnesota because they got sloppy.
Izzo was livid.
They got sloppy with the ball at times, which is something that Izzo does not like, turnovers, okay? And he did not like the rebounding in the first half.
22 turnovers in that game, to be exact.
And still one going away.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to overrate that because as I said, I think I said this in the analysis, and I know I said it on Monday, if Michigan State played Minnesota 20 times, they beat them 20 times. It's that bad a matchup for Minnesota. The only way Minnesota could win is if they have an outlier 3-point shooting game like they had in the first round of the tournament where they went 11 for 27 or something like that. But they're a terrible 3-point shooting team, and Izzo configured the defense so that you're going to have to shoot threes and make them, and they couldn't, and they did that in the regular season, and they did it last season, and they killed them every time. Michigan State won't make those number of turnovers again in this game. And that's going to be a problem for LSU because LSU has to find a way to get some extra possessions in this game. They can maybe outshoot Michigan State, but the other aspects of the game, in my opinion, the rebounding, the offensive rebounding, and the turnovers should favor Michigan State. I think they're going to be very difficult to beat. The tough part is, does that make them a good bet? And I think the answer is no at the price. Because they not only have to win, they have to win by a pretty good margin here to cover the spread. That's a lot of points to lay to a quality LSU team that's very athletic and playing with a lot of confidence right now. So, I mean, this is just one of those games where I don't think you can make a good play. I mean, Michigan State's the right side to win it straight up, but unless you're betting teasers, which are not a good bet in college basketball, I think I stay out of this one.
I gave Dig credit. I'm taking it back. He's smoking again. I'm on Michigan State. I'm on Michigan State strong. So
you're not afraid of the points then?
I am not.
Okay.
I'm
not disagreeing with you. I'm just worried about the points.
No, I'm just busting chops. To me it's this. Yes, they had 22 turnovers. It's only the third time all year they had over 20 turnovers. Why did they have 20 turnovers? Izzo talked about it. They were exhausted. 5 games in 9 days. LSU, 3 games in 9 days. They went through that brutal Big Ten stretch playing Michigan again for a third time and then turning it around and having to play this tournament. You have LSU 5-12 ATS against teams 600 or better. You have LSU's only faced 5 teams with top 30 defenses all year. Lose to Florida State, lose to Houston, lose to Florida State twice, lose to Florida twice. Their only win was that game mid-season where they caught Kentucky by surprise, beat them in Kentucky, and that's it.
Well, they beat Florida once.
They lost both times.
No, they played 3 times, right? They
Did
played
they play 3?
Once in the tournament and twice regular season.
They played them 3, then I missed that last loss. My
the
apologies.
first 2, both regular season games went to overtime.
That would make it then they played 6 and they won 2.
I might be
Florida
old.
Third time.
I might be old, but my memory is still pretty good, buddy.
It was better than mine in that case
certainly
because
is.
I didn't know that. So, but with that point even being correct, I am on Michigan. I think they have enough offense. You saw LSU's point guard be productive, but of course now you're going against Cassius Winston. So you have a better point guard on the opposite side. You have a shutdown defense. You have the coaching edge. You have a coach that's pissed that you won by 20. To me, I'm laying the chalk with Michigan State. Color me green.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Player of the year. Would you go Cassius Winston?
I'd go Culver.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and what I'm going to say on this one, I'm going to make it simple. Michigan State has advanced to the Sweet 16. They have won both of their games. The first one not as comfortable as you would have liked. Second one, they ended up winning by 20. They haven't played a complete game yet.
Okay.
We haven't.
I see Marco agreeing with me here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ralph. I got to agree with you. We haven't seen the best of Michigan State yet, and this is a team. A lot of times we talk about don't overreact to what you just saw. Here's a stat for you. Whenever they win a game by 20 points or more this season, there's no letdown on this Michigan State team. They're 9-1 against the spread in the next game after a 20-point win or more.
Marco and I don't agree much, but we will be watching the game together, so it'll be nice on Friday night to be watching and rooting for the same team rooting against each other.
As long as Oregon's not involved, Marco's doing fantastic.
Yeah, this is it.
Really, it's true. I'm not,
Oregon's the only team that's beat me in the big dance. 9-1 in the big dance. So we'll just stick there and go from there. And it's going to cost me.
You don't mind buying the crab legs when you're 9-1.
Yeah,
just as long as they're not crab legs from Oregon.
All right, guys, let's head to the next one, and that is our Duke Blue Devils and Virginia Tech. We've got a rematch, ACC. These two guys faced during the season. I'll talk about that whenever they met the first time. You've got a Virginia Tech team. We know what they can do. They can play defense. And you've got a Duke team that, let's be honest, even though they're the number 1 seed, everybody's, most people's pick to win it all. I mean, everybody was ready to hand it to Duke. Yeah. They're lucky they're here.
Either, but yeah.
They're lucky that they're here. And
well, they're lucky, but here's the stupid part. This is where, and I'm not. Believe me, I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm superior in any way. But Jesus, a lot of these talking heads don't have the slightest idea of what they're talking about because they're all. This is what I keep on hearing: is well, Central Florida came up with the blueprint on how to beat Duke. They got a 7'6" guy in the middle.
The blueprint. That was the blueprint.
And Duke could not get the ball inside where they are absolutely lethal. Okay? And they're settling for threes outside, which is the worst part of their basketball game.
And they made 10, the second most they made all season long.
But that's if you want to beat Duke, get a guy who's 7'6" with mobility, who's improved tremendously. Get a guy who's red hot on offense, and Dawkins, who had the best game of his career, and maybe you beat him.
And
now here's the thing:
coach that was on your former assistant coach on your team that knows you still.
Now Virginia Tech, while they're a really solid team and very good defensively, and they're going to have confidence because they won the regular season meeting. I know no Zion, but no Justin Robinson either for Virginia Tech. But the thing is that Duke is not going to be hindered by Virginia Tech's size in the paint because they don't have any. Okay, Blackshear's a guy who can, by the way, pick up a couple of quick fouls. Boom, he's on the bench. Then they get even smaller. Not like Virginia Tech was sensational against Liberty either. I cashed that ticket because I got a good number. I laid 8.5, and I won it. I probably didn't deserve to win it because Virginia Tech didn't play very well in that game. I'm not saying I know what's going to happen in this game, but one thing I know is not going to happen in this game is that Duke is not going to play the similar type of game that they played against Central Florida because it's just a completely different matchup. I think Duke is a little better than Virginia Tech at all the different aspects involved in this game. A little better on the glass, a little better with the turnovers. Actually, a little better shooting team as long as they're shooting their shots, and particularly if they're shooting their shots, which is in the paint, getting Zion inside, and the other guy, they don't miss. I think Duke's going to win the game. My decision will be as to whether I want to lay the points or not.
And, Dave, to allude to your part about them not getting to the bucket, they only got to the foul line 12 times in that game against Central Florida. It was like they just quit trying to pound the ball inside.
They were actually intimidated.
Absolutely. And
until Zion went and fouled Falls out.
Yeah.
Taco Falls, that last play that got him out, which was big play.
Very questionable.
Yes. And even then, I saw Taco straight up, so I don't know the call.
No, and then they get 2 rim outs at the other end.
Yeah.
Duke was lucky to survive, but it's not a case of UCF coming up with a magical formula to beat Duke. They were just the right height configuration.
They had the magical formula. Right. You have to have a 7-footer.
Buzz Williams has a formula. It's this: you watch screens on Duke. Buzz Williams, Hokies, undercut every screen. They'll give you that 3-point shot. They load the paint. They always do it. If you screen
and they
out,
did in the first game.
A guy's going to back out, and he's going to go into the lane, and you can have that wide-open shot. To me, I like the under. I don't think Duke's going to hit those shots from 3-point. Virginia Tech is one of the slowest tempo teams. They're happy to walk it up, get rid of that clock, run 20 seconds off before they run a play. I really like this underplay a lot. It may make my card. Duke's not going to hit 10 3-pointers again, and you're just going to have a comfortable game with both teams that know each other. Duke may win by 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know, but I do like the under in this quite a bit. You're getting a Duke total here instead of a Virginia Tech total.
And, guys, I said I'm going to talk about that first meeting. It's not often that we get teams that met in a regular season meet in the big dance until, you get some of these powerhouse teams later on. But that first meeting, if you go back to it, 2 games before that, Duke plays North Carolina for the first time. We know how big of a rivalry that is.
And that's the game Zion got hurt.
That's the game that Zion got hurt, which is the
shoe game.
But then they go the next game to play Syracuse. And we always talk about that injured player theory. You lose a star, how a team, they're going to rally around the injury, have that good game, the first one. And if you guys remember, we talked about that game here on the podcast because I actually gave that out as my best bet that week.
He's bringing back best bets from 2 months ago now. God,
yeah. Well, but it was such a brilliant analysis. I wish I had the soundbite to play it for you guys, but I said Duke would have trouble in the first half against Syracuse because they had to restructure their offense and going against the Syracuse.
And wasn't that the game before Boeheim was dealing with the fatality? Yeah.
All right. So then they had the big first half. Syracuse had the lead at halftime, but Duke come back in the second half and won. The injured player theory. What's part 2 of that? After they win the first game without the injured star, they have that natural.
We don't need the sound clip. We're hearing it again.
Yeah. No, you have that natural letdown because, okay, we're all right. We won without Zion. Everything's going to be okay. Who was that team they played after Syracuse? Virginia Tech.
No, Virginia Tech minus one of their best, maybe their best player at that point because Justin Robinson had gotten hurt.
And Justin Robinson, for those that don't know, is a 4-year starting ACC point guard.
Yep.
I mean, we are talking – I mean, obviously, you're not a one and done like some Duke players, but when you're a starting point guard in the ACC for 4 straight years,
he's a program anchor.
Yes, absolutely.
Program anchor. He's been a great player for them.
No, absolutely. So I like Duke here. I think they get the revenge, and I think Virginia Tech, although you can't fault the way they've played, they had an easy draw. They had St. Louis in the first round, who had just come one of those teams that had to win all the way.
And the A-10 was horrible.
Worn out getting there, and then they caught a Liberty team off of a big upset. It was the perfect storm for them, but it ends in this matchup on Friday. Guys, one of the most intriguing matchups to me, and I'm looking forward to watching this one. I don't know that I can pull the trigger on it, but that is the Houston Kentucky game. Houston, we know what they've done all year. This is a team, that conference, the AAC doesn't get a lot of respect, but I'll tell you what, you had Houston, you had Cincinnati, you had Central Florida, you had Temple in there. South Florida at times even was good. This was
Wichita State.
It was
making a run in the NIT.
No sneeze there because Wichita's going to be really good next year.
Yeah.
This wasn't that bad of a conference, and they've been top to bottom. They've been there all year. Can they match up and get the job done against this Kentucky team? Kentucky 2.5 with a total of 134.5.
Look, here's the tough part: is Washington going to play? I'm breaking this game down, assuming he's not. Okay, I don't think he's going to be playing. I think Kentucky would love to have him out there, but I think it's probably unlikely. And the stats on these teams are really close. Now, I'll grant you a strength of schedule advantage to some extent for Kentucky. But when you take that one player out of the mix, I think it's clear that Kentucky is not the same team without him. Okay, forget the first round. They were playing Abilene Christian. They had a lot of trouble with Wofford. Now, they did get out there, and they made life miserable for Wofford's three-point shooter, and he has the worst game of his life. But he has the worst game of his life, and this is still a contest with a minute to go in the game. All right? And, it ended up landing on 6. So it was hardly an easy win for Kentucky. I think they're going to have a lot of problems with Houston. I think Sampson knows how to attack them. And my early lean on this game, at least, and I know I won't be on the other side. I'm quite sure I won't. I think Houston's got a really good chance to win this game.
If, March Madness, you get a lot of public money. It's like the Super Bowl. So if there's injuries, the lines don't adjust properly. And I think we're seeing this in the situation. If P.J. Washington was playing for Kentucky, it would be one of my best bets
at
for
this
the
number?
entire March Madness.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when you have your leading scorer, leading rebounder, the only sophomore on the team from the starting 5 of last week, and your only starter that shoots over 40% from three-point land and who touches the ball on every offensive possession out, I think he's worth almost 5 points here. I mean, in this situation, in the Sweet 16, being here against this team. Now, with him, he has a hard cast that's getting removed tonight. It's hard to believe that they're going to remove a hard cast. We're recording on Tuesday, and he's going to be ready for Friday.
I just can't see
that
it.
happen.
No.
And he had a walking boot. They thought that was going to be okay. They knew they weren't going to play him the second day of the tournament. They put him in the hard cast, so they're still up in the air. But
It reminds me of the Kansas State kid.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we're hoping, and now they can't play.
To me, it's this. I would have loved to play Kentucky, but with Washington out, does that change my mind to like Houston? No. It's just a pass for me.
All right. I agree with Dave. If I had to go with this one, I lean to the Houston side. In Houston on the defensive end of the floor, last 6 games, they've held 5 of the 6 opponents to 38% or less. They held a couple of them in the 20s, guys. I mean, this defense will lock you down. I just don't know Kentucky if they can hit those shots to stay in the game with Houston. I think this, there's a couple small dogs. I think because of the name Kentucky, the public's going to find their way to Kentucky in this game. I think the values.
Are you surprised Kentucky's only a 2.5-point favorite to Houston because the name's Kentucky?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, they can't make it higher.
Yeah,
because
I agree with you. I'm just saying though.
But Dave, the guys to the party late, the guys that are just betting basketball in last week and now for the season, they look and see that SEC team.
Oh yeah,
Kentucky.
sure.
Yeah.
It's like, Kentucky minus 2.5.
Now, one thing I will point out about Houston's defensive numbers, yes, they're impressive, but, I mean, besides the SWAC and the MEAC, there may not be a worse offensive league than the AAC. I mean, Cincinnati and
Connecticut?
Temple and Connecticut and
my
USF.
God.
And I mean, you were talking some badass offenses. So,
I watched the
yes,
game.
those numbers
It wasn't
are impressive.
good. It wasn't good defense. It was bad offense.
No,
yes.
it's
true.
Yes, but they're not an elite defense because of the
But
offenses.
they were bad offenses. If you watch, there was a game late in the season between Connecticut and South Florida on a Sunday, and it says, "Okay, I'll watch this for a while."
Over under 99.
It was just awful. It wasn't good defense. It was just terrible offense.
All right, guys, the last one, and this is a game I do like. I have an opinion on this one. Auburn, North Carolina. North Carolina -5, total 162. You look at Auburn, they come off just a wire-to-wire. They took Kansas out behind them. 15-5 to open the game and never looked back. Never looked back.
And I know that was a 5% play for you, and how much fun is it to know that you've got a game. And you're not, look, I mean, there's no such thing as a sure thing, but 10 minutes into that game, it's like, I ain't losing this.
We were.
You can't live back quick enough because it was over so
right.
fast.
Yeah. The full disclosure, I was with Brian Leonard and his wife. We were watching the Knights game on Saturday night and watching the basketball games at a bar on the Strip.
The Knights game did not work out as well.
No, the Knights game did not. -425 favorite go down the drain for that one. I didn't have it. We're talking just the Knights. It didn't work out for them. But my plate, and I had a big plate of chicken wings. They tasted
chicken wings. What a shock!
What a shock! They
boneless or with the bone in.
First of all, if you eat boneless chicken wings, I'm not talking to you.
Well, I don't know.
He's old. If he takes his teeth out, it's harder to eat.
No. But I know this though. Always, I order the flats.
Yeah. Oh, I love the flats.
Gotta have the flats.
A lot of places won't let you get all flats.
Screw them, then I'm not going there.
But that would be.
Cool. If he orders flats, he's getting flats.
Well, yeah, they're worried. If you say no to Dave, Guido's coming back in and going to talk to the chef. And
I know a lot of guys, all right?
Okay, so, but they tasted really good on Saturday. There was no sweat in that game. I enjoyed it. But this one, guys, you got two teams. We know what the pace is going to be. The number is -5 North Carolina. The highest total of the Sweet 16. We're looking at 162, and the number's going up. It might even be 162, 163 now as we're taping. Does Auburn stay with North Carolina? Because
I think it's going to be real tough.
It's tough to do what the other team does better.
Yeah,
and
North
Auburn
Carolina
has one way they want to go, and North Carolina is very good at going up tempo.
I think North Carolina's playing the best ball in the tournament. Now, part of that is a bias because I like teams that move the ball and aren't, they're more fun to watch.
The number 6 tempo is a lot better than watching those 8 teams in the South that were 323 or higher.
It's better. But the thing is that it's legit. I mean, the point guard is playing great basketball, and he's a big kid. He's tough. And he's going to be a lottery pick. And this is Roy's type of team. They can really get up and down the floor, and they play pretty smart basketball, too. Big edges over Auburn in the categories that I've been mentioning, where you've got the offensive rebounding and the turnovers. They're just better at it. And I think they can outshoot Auburn. I haven't firmly played anything yet, but this is probably the ringleader for me is North Carolina.
Wow.
Ringleader.
Wow. Stepping out. I like to hear that. I've gone back and forth.
I can see it at WagerTalk now. Ringleader, play of the week.
We got Ms.
No, I don't
I
don't like using any of those things. Here's the play, okay? If you like it, that's great. If you don't, I don't care. I'm not big into game of the whatevers, and we don't do.
Right.
By the way, we'll throw this in. Part of the things I like, one of the things I really like about WagerTalk, there are no games of the year.
Nope.
At WagerTalk, they're not allowed.
No,
and you know what? Because
there's no such
play
thing.
Is 3 units, a 4% is 4, a 5% is 5. Your top play is not even double a 3% play, which is the way it should be. Right. It's not. People bet way too much on those games because of the title.
I always had to do games of the year at other companies that I've been with over the years because they sold like crazy. Okay, they really did. But here's the thing: if there was such a thing as a game of the year, I would bet that and never make another bet. I do my one bet a year in each sport, hit a great percentage, and call it a day. That's why there's no such thing as a game of the year, okay?
Well, there are several sites out there that are a lot of game of the years.
It's the happiest thing when I got away from
That's
that.
Why we don't call you Vegas, Dave.
Didn't have to. No. And when I stopped having to do that, it was like, oh, good.
All right.
Because I just can't. I don't. If they win, it's great.
I agree. No game is worth doubling than another game. So I completely agree with that.
Let me jump in for 1 second. In case anybody missed that little subtle shot in there, it wasn't a shot at our buddy Dave. It was a shot at somebody else here in town. And a shout out to our girl Kelly with the Showtime series Action. If you guys haven't checked it out, they've aired the first episode this past Sunday. Next episode will be this Sunday. It's a 4-part series. 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern. Check it out. Kelly's on there. They follow her around Vegas. They follow around a few other guys. Crackman, if you've never seen Crackman, this guy is legit. This guy
he's the real deal.
Real deal. He is so amusing. We're actually trying to see if we can get him to come in to
he's just a
videos.
Really sharp guy. He's a good guy too.
Oh,
Okay,
absolutely
everybody likes him.
Loves his family. Loves that. He's a legitimate.
But he's been
genuine, nice person.
In a genuine professional gambler for decades. Yeah. Okay,
and there's somebody else on that show that's just the complete opposite of that. Tune into the show. You'll see what we're talking about. They're showing all sides of the industry, and that was Ralph's little.
All right. After Dave, we know Dave likes North Carolina. To me, it's this. Auburn is North Carolina's little brother. You don't have the point guard, but you have 9 or 10 people that play multiple minutes, and you can come in waves. North Carolina had 9 players with 10.5 or more minutes. Auburn has 10 players with 11 or more minutes. So Auburn is a team, shoot the 3 and D up. They have the most three-point shots in college basketball this year, and they're number 3 in turnover margin. But a press probably doesn't work against Colby White in North Carolina. You have teams that can handle the ball. So, to me, if Auburn's going to be successful, they have to hit their threes. So I'm going to leave it with this. I'm not sure what side I like. I'm not sure what total I like. But for our listeners, if you like Auburn, I think the game's going over. If you like North Carolina, that means Auburn's not making their threes. You like the under.
All right. Well, you said the little brother you compared to Auburn. I call Auburn the poor man's North Carolina. They're the same team, just not – you don't have quite as many marquee players, and I think that's the difference. They're going to both try to do the same style. One of them has been doing it a lot longer and a lot better.
Yeah, North Carolina has 2 first-round NBA draft choices playing on their roster where Auburn doesn't.
Yeah, and that's
lottery picks.
Yeah. And to me, that's the difference. And that game for Auburn against Kansas, even though Kansas was banged up, it was that name Kansas, and they had that, a wire-to-wire. It was a laugher. I like to look to go against teams after an easy win like that.
Don't forget this. Auburn looked great in that game.
Kansas was out their best 3 players.
If New Mexico State doesn't get stupid at the end of regulation,
tie the game instead of going for
take the layup, okay? I got to tell you, now I have no way of proving this out, but I think the Aggies were going to beat him in overtime. I thought they had him on the ropes and ready to knock him out.
If they go to overtime, they have all of the momentum in the world.
Well, and at that point, they've actually got better bodies on the floor at that point, too.
Well, Iowa had all the momentum against Tennessee, and that didn't work out in overtime.
Didn't work, and they almost didn't cover. You got to,
So
I know.
I bring it out that it's not the momentum always doesn't dictate that you're going to have.
That's the thing on Auburn is, but what I'm trying to say on Auburn is they are an erratic basketball team.
Yes.
There are times when Auburn looks like it can beat anybody in the country.
They are hectic.
Are other times when they can't beat anybody in the country. I mean, even if Avery Johnson was still coaching Alabama, they might not be able to beat them. Okay.
What a shot.
Now, you know what? Because that's the one thing I almost always get right. Early in the season, I can tell you the coaches that aren't going to be back. And I had Avery Johnson right at the top of my list. He's a terrible head coach. He's made for the pro game, not the college game. And Alabama will find somebody else.
Throw one last stat for you guys on this North Carolina game. The last game went under the total. This season, following a game where they had 1 or more unders, North Carolina, in their next game, 15-4 against the spread. I'll go ahead. I'll say it. I'm on North Carolina. I like them on Friday night. That's going to wrap up the Sweet 16 games. Now, we broke them all down for you. So that means there's only one thing left. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will do best bets. That's up next. You're going to get a best bet from all 3 of us and a best bet from our special guest this week on the podcast, Adam Burke, up next for best bets when we return. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It's the home stretch. You know what time it is. It's best bet time, and we've got a bonus round for you. You're going to get 4 this week, not 3. Let's start it off.
Ooh, you could do the not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4.
We could have. Yeah, that's
unbelievable.
4 and 4.
Yeah. Dave, we're going to start with you. Where are you going for your best bet?
I would recommend that you bang the book with North Carolina. We talked about the Tar Heels in the last segment, and I think they're a good bet.
Adam Burke joining us. Appreciate you for having on. Adam, again, tell our listeners where they can hear you, where they can follow you at Twitter, listen to the pod.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Skating Tripods. BangTheBook.com is the website where you can find my work. Daily MLB picks over the course of the season. Bang the Book Radio is on Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio. You name it. Wherever you look, you're going to find Bang the Book Radio.
All right, and who are you going to bang the book with, buddy?
I'm going to take the under here in this Duke-Virginia Tech game. You know, Virginia Tech here on the season, second highest three-point rate against, 50.4%. So they force teams to shoot from the outside. That's not Duke's game at all. Of course, Virginia Tech, if they control the tempo in this one, should help them as well. But you know what? They're going to pack that key. They're going to pack the two-point range. They're going to force Duke to shoot threes. As Rolf mentioned, that's not their game. So we'll take the under in the Virginia Tech-Duke game.
Good stuff from Adam. Let's go to Ralph. Who are you banging the book with?
Color me green. I am on Sparty. Again, I think it's a coaching mismatch. I think the coaching defense is there. I think the point guards match up top to bottom. I think LSU is a team going to be exposed that they were a surprise team. People didn't expect them to be as good as they were. People didn't prep for them the same way they should have in the first half of the year. We now see the biggest coaching edge we may have seen in tournament in the last few years of the tournament. Go Sparty.
All right, I'm going to go with the Duke Blue Devils. I love when you've got one of the Blue Bloods, one of the teams that's supposed to go all the way, have that scare. This was beyond a scare. They should have lost the game. Let's be honest with it. And they're facing a team that they're familiar with from their conference. They're playing with revenge. I gave you the reasons why I thought that first meeting went towards the Virginia Tech side. They were in a favorable situation. I like Duke to get the job done. He'll have this team's attention all week from that I don't want to say lackluster performance, but they should have lost. But again, it comes down, there's not going to be a 7-footer in the middle clogging things up and altering their game. Duke gets it done. But I got to admit, I still like your under, Adam, with Duke winning. I know a lot of people would do the correlated parlay, but I think it is Duke, and it is still going to be under because of the pace of the game. Take Duke, lay the points. That's it for the best bets this week. I want to thank all of our guests this week. William Bernanke, as he joins us each and every week to take us behind the counter. Special in-studio guest this week, Adam Burke. You can follow him at Skating Tripods, and, of course, at bangthebook.com. Be sure to check out his radio show. He is a great friend to Wager Talk, and we love having him on. And quite frankly, baseball season, we're going to have you on some more if your schedule permits. And to my partners in crime, Dave Cokin, Ralph Michaels, Mark Seidel behind the controls. Big shout out to Johnny Detroit. He makes sure that our podcast is up and available everywhere. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, listen on Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and all of the other major podcast outlets. Last but not least, you guys, our listeners. We wouldn't have a show if you wouldn't be listening, and we appreciate you guys tuning in each and every week. Until next week, I'm Marco D'Angelo. Let's cash some tickets.